When I was 12 years old, I wrote in my diary, my New Year's resolutions are to lose 10 pounds and to get the neighbor boy to like me. He never liked me, which was, as it turns out, fine. I did lose the 10 pounds. And that spiraled me into an eating disorder that lasted for about 6 years. There's an incredible amount of stigma about eating disorders. And I think it's because there's still a lot of misunderstanding. People still think this is a choice, that it's a lifestyle choice. People are vain and just want to lose weight. Eating disorders are a mental health illness, and they have really significant physical health ramifications as well. When I think back, sort of why did I have an eating disorder and how do I understand it now, both 20 years later and looking at all the research and as a professional, I had all the characteristics and all the genetic loading to get an eating disorder. I was a little more exact than most kids. I was very focused. I had a slightly perfectionistic temperament. At some point, I ended up starting to purge, so I was eating and then vomiting whatever I was eating. Nobody knew about that. It was all a very big secret. So often people want to know why somebody gets an eating disorder. And it's an interesting question. Why doesn't everybody get an eating disorder? Because there's such a focus on weight and shape, and it's sort of a combination of 3 areas. The biological area, people go on a diet. When you change the way you eat, things happen in your brain. For some people, when they go on a diet, that's a trigger to an eating disorder. Then you go to the environmental part. Well, why would they go on a diet? They go on a diet because they live in a world that tells them being thin or muscular or lean is the most important thing you can do. And then we have the psychological piece that there seems to be something about temperament. There are some people who are more predisposed to have an eating disorder than others, and they have certain temperament traits that we see over and over again. And for an eating disorder, you have to have sort of part of all 3 of those things. So I was trapped in this eating disorder for a long time, living at home for 2 years with an eating disorder, and nobody ever knew. Went to college, came home at fall break, and my parents, it was enough separation that my parents sort of realized that I had lost weight, and then everyone sent up the alarm bells. And so slowly, as I started to let people in and tell them a little bit more, my friends would say, really, what's going on? Like, you're not happy, you're isolating, you're not eating with us, what are you doing? That I started to be more and more willing to talk. And so over the course of some group therapy that I did and a lot of really powerful family therapy that we did and some work with a nutritionist that I did, I sort of slowly started crawling out of it. So as I slowly figured out how to be me in a way that was positive and not get hijacked by the things that were less positive, and I needed to make sure that I slept well, ate well, was active but in a moderate way. I had to learn a lot of different things to sort of be me. For me personally, and I also believe this professionally, that I don't have an eating disorder anymore. I certainly have those temperament traits that contributed to me having an eating disorder. So I pay a lot of attention to how I can be the best me I can be. So I know for me, to really maintain my recovery and my positive relationship with myself, I have to have things like yoga that help me to really center and calm and stay with myself and pay attention to myself and connect to myself. I like to garden, I like to work with the soil, I like to be in nature because it's very calming for me and it's very connecting. There's a lot of functional MRI brain research happening right now where they put people in MRI machines, people who have an eating disorder and people who had an eating disorder a while ago, and look at their brains in an MRI scanner to try to understand what is it about the brain that's different in people who have an active eating disorder, and is there anything different in the brain of people who had an eating disorder but don't now? I have an enormous amount of hope. I think we're going to change the world. So everybody knows that you can recover from an eating disorder. I have an enormous amount of hope the work that I do and all of my amazing colleagues do will help people who don't believe that they can get better. I think one of the first things you can do to support somebody you suspect has an eating disorder or has an eating disorder is to not be afraid to talk about it. Everybody says, you know what, recovery was the hardest thing I've ever done, and it was the most important thing I've done, and my life is so much better that I can't imagine not having done that. And it's really taught me how to be me. And that's so hopeful that people can get there.